And also just express my gratitude for your willingness to join us, to share our time together. And I'm going to pass the baton over to you now.
Great, thank you, Tanya. Can everyone hear me okay? Perfect. Well, I'd like to start with just some gratitude, really, for you, Tanya, and for all of you for inviting me into this space. It was a delightful surprise when you asked me, and I think as excited as maybe more than anyone to find out what happens. So just lots of gratitude for the invitation and for welcoming me into your group. So thank you for that. And it was interesting listening to your summary, because my plan was, 1, start talking. 2, not so sure. 3, stop talking. That was the rough outline that I had.
That sounds perfect. Yeah, and
how much time will elapse? I don't know.
And I don't intend it, and I certainly am going to keep my microphone on mute. I will not be interjecting at all. But Ghoot does not have a bio online that I could share with folks. And I don't know if there's anything you want to share by way of introduction to kind of how you came to be here in this moment. I'd certainly be interested in hearing more about that, if that's feeling like a good place to start.
Sure. Well, that's number 1 taken care of. And now you're giving me something for number 2, so let's run with that. Well, it's funny, isn't it? I mean, I'm looking out at all these faces, and there isn't really anything I can share that you don't already know, that isn't already here. And even to your question, Tanya, of what brought you here to this moment, and in a sense, you already know that story. Each one of you knows that story. You think that my story is different from yours, and in the details and the particulars it is. But really, it's the same story. Because I'm guessing if I got to know any of you, your story would be full of all the same things that mine has been. Joy, sadness, pleasure, disappointment, searching, giving up, loving, losing. That list can go on and on. You know my story. I could tell you all the particulars. I could tell you how I started practicing as a teenager in the 1980s. How I experimented like a crazy person in the 90s, trying everything and anything. Drugs, teachers, traditions, all of it. I could tell you all about peak experiences and all the insights that you do or don't think that you got or forgot. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. It's the same story. And in that sense, whatever name you put to it, we share that same fabric of experience. Suffering, pleasure, confusion, all of those things. And actually, maybe the most pertinent part of my story is that the less I ran away from myself and my own story, the more I got to know what was behind the story. Strangely, it felt like I got to know other people better. I could understand other people better. The more I understood my own pain and suffering and why I seemed to be locked in this perpetual battle with reality, trying to tell it how it was wrong and how it should be the way that I wanted it to be. Banging my head against that brick wall. But the more I got honest about that, I suddenly realized, this is the same for everyone else. Wait a minute. And I think that's probably the most interesting part. All of the other stuff is just details in the story. What do you learn from the story? Do you learn to keep hitting your head against the brick wall? Do you keep running away from yourself? Do you keep fighting with reality and the expectations you hold over it? Or do you stop and look and get honest with yourself? That's what I was faced with. And there were some key moments in my story where, despite my attempts at running away and not really wanting to be honest, because the kind of honesty I'm talking about, when you've been honest with yourself and looking at how much you're resisting life, it starts off not quite very pleasant. You don't like what you see when you see yourself like that. But if you're able to sit with it, and circumstances, in a sense, forced that upon me. My son died about 12 years ago. That made me stop. That made me stop and think, wait a minute, my son has just died. Why is life continuing on as if nothing has happened? I could have stopped and become lost in that. But for some reason, I found a way to be honest with myself. The other time was when I suffered a spinal injury, lost the function of my body not long after my son had died. Can't move, can't distract myself and pretend anymore. And so there's some sort of circumstantial things that create an opportunity or encourage you, invite you. Do you want to be honest? Or are you going to keep pretending? Are you going to keep living in abstraction, living in your thoughts, trying to think your way out of your own suffering, trying to think your way out of whatever predicament you find yourself in? So that, you know, there's a little bit about some of the details that you might think, well, those are different. But the underlying fabric is no different from any of you. That's the invitation that we all have all the time. The frustration when we're confused about why things are the way that they are. That moment of honesty when we suddenly notice that we're resisting life and trying to convince it that it should be the way that we think it should be. And when we get, I like to refer to it as getting naked. It's a little bit playful. We get naked with ourselves. And what I mean by that is we don't deny all of the surface story, all of the suffering, all the confusion, all the thoughts, all of that, but we see past it. We realize that it's just clothing that we borrowed from somewhere, from something, from someone else. And we start taking it off. And you take it off bit by bit. And you start getting naked. And you see what's there underneath all of the expectation, all of the thinking, all of the concepts. That's what I found. I found that I was living my life in concepts. I was seeing life through all of these concepts. And I'm sure anyone who's been involved in whatever this is, no matter how long you've been doing it, I'm pretty sure you've already collected a sizable collection of concepts. You know, mindfulness, awareness, meditation, self, other, not self. I could go on and on. But I know if I looked in any of your concepts collections, we'd be like, hey, look, we've got the same ones. But is a realization, isn't there, where am I burdened by these concepts? Or am I able to be fluid and playful with them? Do these concepts and descriptions that I see the world through, do they help? Do I feel more naked when I'm seeing and living through them? Or am I locking myself into some kind of prison of unworthiness made of thought and belief? And at least for me, I realized that I just was entangled and twisted and confused by all the mental gymnastics. It was like torture, self-inflicted torture. Seeing life, thinking that I'm living it, but really through the lens of concepts, burdened by the weight of my own thinking. I had a conversation with somebody this week, actually. It came up, and this question came out, and it's a playful question. It's a totally silly question, but it's come to mind, so I'm going to say it. Um, if you ask yourself, "Am I a concept?" It's like it's a silly question, but it's serious. Am I a concept? I don't know what comes to mind for you or what comes up in your experience, but I'm guessing there's some kind of recognition, of some kind, that there's something beyond concepts. Right? Concepts are useful, they're helpful, but they're not this, whatever this is. Am I a concept? And just in that recognition, you can even see almost this need, this habit, this instinct to jump to conclusions about what you see when you ask yourself that question. No, but let me tell you all these concepts that come to describe why I'm not a concept, right? It's completely absurd. And yet, that's kind of how we live. So it might be silly, it might be playful, it might be absurd, but you can kind of stop and go, oh, yeah, hold on a minute. I know that words are not the thing. I know that. I know that concept, I'm not a concept. I know that it's just a tool. Oh, but yeah, I recognize that I might know that, but I'm not sure I always live like that. You can ask yourself other questions like, is this waiting for my acceptance? Is this waiting for my approval? And you can get an aroma of, well, there's a little bit of absurdity about which way around I live my life when I start asking questions like that. Like, yeah, okay, these concepts and thinking and language are beautiful tools. But is this waiting for me to tell it what it means? I like spending my time telling things what they mean. That's like a hobby we all have in common, isn't it? And yet, yeah, the question kind of doesn't need verbalized, the answer. Is this waiting for me to explain how it works? Or is it waiting for me to tell it what to do? Is this waiting for me to fix it? Is this waiting for me to change it in any way? Is this asking anything of me? Is this waiting for me to fix myself? Is it waiting for me to perfect myself? Is it waiting for me to get the right concepts from the right people and wear them the right way and develop the right skills just to the sufficient amount that everything will then be okay? Is this waiting for me to develop an elaborate system and explanation and justification for why things are the way they are? And then it will magically be grateful for my efforts. Or is this just somehow wrong? That maybe gives you a window into how big my collection of concepts is. It's just a small glimpse, but I'm sure we've got a few that are shared. How will we ever know when we've got the right concepts? Ah, oh, now I've got the right concept. What? Why do I need someone else's concept to explain to me this? Well, we all know this. We know. And yet we're not playful with our concepts. We forget that they're just pointers, that they're just descriptions. We forget that no description, no matter how good it is, how nice it makes us feel, it's just a description. And the more time we spend living in description, it's that that creates a distance from this. When we spend all our time in descriptions and in concepts, trying to get concepts to resolve themselves so that somehow we don't feel like there's some distance or separation, forgetting that it's just that in the first place. We forgot that those were just tools and pointers back to ourselves. So we spend our time thinking about our experience and thinking through the lens of concepts. But what difference does it make when in those moments it flips the other way around and the concepts and the thinking are illumined by this? Oh, now I remember those. That's what those concepts are useful for. They're illumined by this. I'm not looking through those, wondering why there's some dissonance with this, because it no longer fits into my concept and my thinking. And we all have those moments. And you know, it's like the more time we spend seeing things through our thinking and our concepts, it's like we're gaslighting ourselves into accepting that we're not worthy, that we're already broken, because we have all these concepts. And these concepts have implications and meanings that we associate with them. So we try to see our lives and look at our lives and fix our lives through these concepts. And we're, in effect, just gaslighting ourselves with the implicit assumption that we are already broken. That at some future point, I've fixed all the mistakes, I've corrected all of my flaws, addressed all of the errors, think the right way, act the right way, then I'll be worthy of being worthy. And then I might even be worthy of being happy. But we know that's the wrong way around. We already know that. And these habits, these unexamined assumptions, when we borrow other people's concepts, we borrow our own concepts, we put them on, we look at life through them. It's that perpetuates our suffering. We'll never line up. Of course, concepts are not the problem, just to be clear. But our enchantment with them seems to create this friction, seems to create this separation from ourselves, from life. We're beguiled by them, and we forget that they're just descriptions. But when we remember and we allow them to be illumined by this, we remember that nothing needs to be changed. Nothing needs to be fixed. There's a sticky habit. We're languishing in language. Our whole existence is built with words and stories and meanings. Entire worlds of abstraction, fabrication. But we remember at the beginning. That's just a game. It's a game of language. We know there's a beyond concept. We know that hundreds of times every single day. It's just so close, it's so obvious, it's so ordinary that it's not good enough because we're too hypnotized by the language, by the promise of something other. It's like the concepts encode that language of becoming. But can we remember the taste of being free of the need to become, of the need to fix this? You know, whether you think of yourself as a seeker or a practitioner, whatever language we use, in one sense, it's a confirmation that there's an apparent anomaly that needs to be corrected. But really, that anomaly is just assumption. Come back to that question of, is this waiting for me to tell it what it means? Is this waiting for me to fix myself? It's absurd. And when we peel off those layers of assumption and thinking, we start to see just how our assumptions are no longer tenable. They're useful language and concepts in daily life, wonderful practical tools, but they're no longer tenable in terms of keeping me locked in a prison of unworthiness, keeping me locked in a promise of some time in the future when things will be better. But what happens when we drop that? When we drop the need to become, when we drop the need to know, when we drop the need to subjugate our own experience to concepts. You can insert your own description here. What happens there? It doesn't matter what words you use to describe it. It's remembering and seeing that and letting go. Maybe you see the simple beauty of what already is. Maybe words come to mind that never seem quite adequate, that you're no longer burdened by those concepts, and you see this in its simple beauty. And the contrast is clear, and words come to mind like peace, and love, compassion, equanimity, wisdom. For me, the more honest I've become with myself, the kinds of phrases that inadequately point towards that are things like an unburdened heart, a heart that is already radiant, in spite of my apparent flaws and imperfections. A heart that isn't waiting for me to do anything to make everything okay. That's the kind of nakedness. We all like getting naked, but this is the kind of nakedness that unburdens recognition that the burden was never there. It was just assumed. That other people's clothes and concepts that I'd draped myself in. What description is your description? And you can see there's no wrong description. Because in that sense, all descriptions are wrong. They're all inadequate. But we can appreciate them if we remember that they're just descriptions. They all remain inadequate pointers to the same unfindable no thing that can't be described. From different perspectives, with different words and descriptions, all trying to point us back to remind us, stop trying to eat the menu. I mean, but we keep making that concession to concepts, and the voice comes in, but yeah, what about this? And oh, but yeah, but yes, but. So you can see that that constant concession to concepts, putting them first, perpetuates this sense that somehow we're not enough, that somehow this is not enough, that somehow this has to change before. And we confuse the description with what's already. Again and again and again. And that's okay. Then we have a moment of abatement. And then there's one more. But, yes, but. There's this really clever person I listened to on YouTube, and they had this really great explanation, and they put it all in context and described it. And what you're saying is utter bullshit. And actually, you need to do this, 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 this. Think about it that way, and you have this. Okay, I just took the bait again. Okay. Same problem, many disguises. The master of disguises. How many times have I taken the bait over the years? How many different disguises? Like, he's seen through this disguise. Let's put on a fake moustache and a hat. This will get him this time. Right enough. I take the bait. And I'm like, wait a minute. Because sooner or later it dawns on us that the answer doesn't come from the mind. The answer is not in the mind. The mind thinks like your butt farts. It's just what it does. You never get the answer that satisfies from the mind. You might get gratification, a feeling of, oh, now I understand. Now I'm back in control. Now I feel safe. Now, yes, this is the concept I was looking for. This is the description I needed. Whew. Feeling a bit dodgy there for a minute. And then we realized that that's just another disguise. It's the fake moustache, the hat, but this time they've got a dress and a pair of high heels and they're walking with the cane. And I've never seen that one before. And I just took the bait all over again. And then you're like, wait a minute, stop looking in the mind. All the answers that come from the mind are concepts, are thinking. And all they do is point away from what is. That's the nature of what it is, particularly when we forget that that's what is happening. So we get sucked in to the world of concepts again, this world of explanations and descriptions and justifications, forgetting that that instantly subjugates us and our experience to not being worthy again. And the whole cycle continues. And we wonder why we get dizzy and we get confused and we get exhausted by the whole thing. It never ends. Because the answer isn't there. We can start to see how this absurd predicament of trying to get concepts to resolve themselves. I mean, it's never going to happen. And that's the honesty. Is seeing all of that and being able to see it in ourselves and to see that and not run. And in doing so, just sitting with it and seeing it with ourselves. Seeing how we might relate to that with horror or shame or denial or whatever comes up. Being able to be honest with ourselves over and over that allows it to lose its potency, allows it to lose its pull and its grip on it. So we can still use concepts, we can still use language, we can still function. There's nothing wrong with those things, but we're not enchanted by them. we're not pulled away from this. We're not left with a perpetual sense of this is not enough. I'm not enough. Things need to be otherwise. I don't know what this is. And I don't have a way to name it. I don't know what it is. And I don't know how it works. But I do know it doesn't need any of that of me. I was chatting with someone recently, with someone that both Tanya and I know, about this topic. And a phrase that came out of my mouth that's just come to mind again is, yeah, it's like I fell in love with something I don't understand. And that was that. The obvious simplicity of what is versus the confusion that I drown in when I try to think about it or solve it or interfere with it. The obvious okayness of the way things are versus a relentless sense of unworthiness and estrangement from my own whatever this is. A simple remembering that this is never the problem. Being willing to be honest with myself no matter what that means. that's number two taken care of. Number three is stop talking. So I'm going to switch to number three now and hand back to you, Tanya, and see where we are.
Great. Thank you so much, Goot. I'm gonna press